Hey everyone, you're listening to the Active Turnkey Podcast, a podcast designed for hands-off, passive real estate rental investors. In the Active Turnkey Podcast, you'll hear Tom Olson and Jarrod Stoutmeister discuss all things turnkey rentals with other turnkey providers, service providers, and rental investors. Our goal is to help you reach your financial freedom and whatever comes after that. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Active Turnkey Podcast. I'm your host, Jarrod Stoutmeister with the Tom Olson, and we are back for yet another podcast.
This is about like our millionth episode.
View.
Oh, our millionth
download.
view. We're almost to a million views. Download, sorry,
Sure,
not
subscribers.
Episode. Yeah, we have just, man, we're soaring.
Yeah.
With our views and our, I mean, it's understandable why they would
if you're having a hard time finding all those views and downloads, don't worry.
Yes, we got them covered.
But we do have a few people in the office all day long
that they're
downloading,
clicking, making
likes,
sure that we can
subscribing, creating emails and subscribing. But whatever you gotta do.
Yeah, whatever you gotta do.
To build your.
We are trying
base.
to add value, and part of that value is entertainment. So we try to entertain a little, make fun of ourselves a little bit.
Sure.
I do think we have at least 6 downloads, Jarrod, just so you know. So,
Yeah, consistently.
Yeah,
we've.
No, actually, it is quite a few more than we actually kind of thought. We just figured we would do this for our investors and just for the people that were already investing with us. But really, we're getting a lot of traction. A lot of people are actually coming to us, and really wasn't made for that. We do appreciate it. We have a lot of people that we already work with, and it's not really the reason for us to have the podcast is to get more clients, but to really educate. And really, like, I think at the end of the day, sometimes it's good to educate because the teacher always does the learning, right? So sometimes when we're having to study or we're having to think about, hey, what can we do for the next podcast? We get to kind of, learn ourselves a little bit and relearn things, and not just learn them, but know them to a degree to be able to teach it.
Absolutely.
Right. So, that's part of what we're doing here on the Active Turnkey Podcast, the best way to buy rentals. Plus, it gives us an opportunity for me and Jarrod to be on camera. And Jarrod and myself, we just love the spotlight. And it's just so awesome to be on camera. Yeah. I'm just kidding, guys. I really don't care. Jarrod does. He wants to be an influencer.
Oh, definitely. No, I absolutely do. It's my dream. I have a T-shirt that says that. I want to be your influencer.
I'm going to be an influencer.
And if you do see us, if you have a chance to go to YouTube and watch this one, if you don't normally do that, you'll notice that I'm incredibly tan.
Yes.
We were both in Florida last week.
Beds?
No, we were in Florida.
I know, I'm just kidding.
And our families went to Disney last week, and we had an amazing time. And so I know you guys are all intimidated by this tan.
Yes,
but
it's quite intimidating, Jarrod. You need to make sure you keep shaved. So
yeah, I know that it's pulling away.
Yeah.
It's pulling away from it.
You're
I
missing
get it.
the tan with all the.
But
yeah.
There. So anyway, we're not gonna.
We could talk about real estate.
We're not gonna spend too much time on my tan. But
any tan lines, Jarrod, you want to show us or something?
Absolutely, absolutely, right where they should be. But today we are going to be talking about handling tenant complaints.
Oh man, Jarrod, you should have warned me.
Yeah, I did, but it's okay. Yeah,
you caught me there. You did warn me.
I did, and it was part of our meeting before.
Our pre-meeting,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah, our scheduled meeting there. But
we spend about 4 hours, and it takes us about 4 hours to meet before we can do this 25-minute podcast because there's so much in-depth information that we want to get out there.
It's true. And you have to figure out what you're not.
I mean, we're at the end of the day sometimes because we're like, oh man, we got to get this recorded before we get out of here today. So
yeah, there's so much we want to put in there we have to pull out just because there's just so much value. But the handling tenant complaints, right? That is one of the things that you want your property manager to do for you. You do not want that, right? You don't.
I'm
if you're
sorry,
the owner,
I can't stop laughing.
Why?
There's something that's going on in my head and it won't stop.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
that's good.
It keeps spinning.
It's good to have things going on in your head. I've always said that.
I'm going to bite my tongue.
No, if you're an investor and you are into rental properties, you don't want to be getting those complaints, right?
No, I don't.
No, I don't either. I live local.
I live local.
We could do it,
I could do it.
Yep.
I could take the tenant calls.
It's possible, is what we're saying. It's possible you could do it, but
I would be good at it.
You would.
I would be good at it.
Why would you be good?
But I would hate it.
You'd be good at it, but you would hate it.
It would be like poking my eye with my finger all day.
Okay.
Like I could do it, and I'd probably be really good at poking my eye with my finger, but
I had no doubt
it would
be good.
It would be painful.
Yeah, okay. And hence
that's what we're talking about.
Pain.
Exactly.
So this is actually a podcast about pain today.
Yes.
But no, really, this is one of the worst parts of having the turnkey.
And honestly,
property,
in
right?
my opinion, like we're buying even rentals right now in Pensacola, and we're hiring a property management company to manage them for us right now until we have our own property management company down there. So even me, when I'm buying, I'm the same way. I don't manage even my own tenants, like in my own properties. I don't manage it. I don't take the phone calls. I'm not scheduling repairs. This is honestly one of the biggest values that a property manager can give is the peace of mind that somebody is going to take care of it, but it's not you.
So when I started working with Tom, we were wholesaling, and that's pretty much all we did. And we started wholesaling this about 7 years ago, and then we transitioned into turnkey rentals. And when we were wholesaling, one of the things, tactics you do is when someone makes a counter offer, maybe on a sale price, the line is maybe I don't have the authority to answer that question, so I need to talk to my partner.
That's a great wholesale tip, just so everybody knows. This is not a wholesale podcast.
It's not,
but good wholesale tip.
Yeah, I need to talk to my partner, and so it gives you an opportunity to think and to maybe add a little bit of authority or power to your team. But that's what the property manager does. Is first of all, that's a buffer for you. You do not really want to be communicating directly with the tenant, because in my experience, when I first started buying, we did manage before this, and I would always give in. I'd always give them what they wanted.
And this isn't even part of the podcast, really. We didn't plan on this, but like so that's one reason, right? Sure. Is that you're going to give in. You're going to feel like
because I'm a nice guy.
Right, or at least
so
you
nice.
want people to think that, right?
Okay. No, I am. I'm so
just kidding. Jarrod is a nice guy. But on the other side, like if it's like you and a property manager and you're talking with a tenant, like what is the tenant going to say? They're always going to say, "But he said."
Oh yeah, there you
go. But he said I'm going to do like so. At the end of the day,
it's true.
It's having a property manager that like will actually write down all the conversations. And that will, put them in a nice little packet like Buildium and try to make a lot of the communication come so it's very transparent, is super helpful. But I mean, that's not the podcast today. The podcast is really very specifically about those calls. And, maybe if I'm an owner, I'm going to get called from the property manager at some point, and there's going to be maintenance repairs, we've talked about this over and over again. It is one of my pet peeves, I think. When somebody buys a rental property and they think that there's never going to be a repair.
Absolutely.
So it really is. Like people are like, well, I just bought this house. How can there be a clogged toilet? I'm like, do you ever have a clogged toilet at your own house? Like, I really want to be like, what in the world is wrong with people? So it's really a pet peeve of mine because I know with my own house, right, Jarrod, in your own house, like I think you're replacing a roof here, aren't you?
I am.
Right. So this even happens at your own house.
True.
Like the house that you just bought, how many years ago?
About 4 years ago.
4 years ago, and he's got to replace his roof.
Already.
Like it happens. So that's kind of one of my pet peeves. But that's for a different topic. I think we've already hit that too many times. But the actual tenant request, right? So when a tenant calls and says, "Hey, what something's wrong?" Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, now these are complaints. We call it complaints because in some cases it's a legitimate concern.
Absolutely.
That needs to be done. And in other cases, they are literally complaining, and it may not even have any kind of ground at all for repairs or what have you. Now, one thing Tom did mention that is very important, that is part of this, is that you really do want the property manager to make sure that they are handling all that information, that data, that all the communication coming in. You want to make sure that that's being documented. Because it really does. For instance, I had a situation where I had a tenant in a house that I purchased that was not managed by our our company. I bought it occupied. The tenant was not paying rent throughout COVID, and then he was gonna. When I sent the eviction, when we were gonna do the eviction, he decided at that point he was ready to pay everything, and then we were working through the things, and then he was ready to bring in the check. And then he decided at that point he didn't want to spend the money. Or he
said he wanted to pay the
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
But in the end, when it comes to the eviction, the fact that he told us that he was ready to pay it and then decided not to, that's important documentation
makes him
for
look
down the road.
really bad, doesn't it?
Exactly. So you really want to. So you talk about complaining. He's going back and forth, or hey, the reason why I didn't pay was because of this.
Right.
And then it's documented. Yeah, now it's documented, and then that is a good actually part of the complaints. Your property manager can help catch those things.
Right, and I think a good mindset to go into this even is like understand that still over 60% of Americans own their own home. Mm-hmm. So to know that it's still like you're dealing with the group of people you're dealing in, and I don't mean to be derogatory and tell you that all tenants are bad people. Mm-hmm. But you just have to know you are still dealing with that 40% of renter pool, which, again, I'm not saying one's better than the other, but like if you think about who takes care of their own responsibilities versus who doesn't or who doesn't think that they need to, like it's going to be more likely that somebody who owns their property is going to understand they have responsibility and somebody that rents a property isn't going to. So like understanding, going into that up front, as being a landlord, being a property owner, you have to know that. But then when the complaints come in, when, I've got a toilet that's clogged, right? Like I have found, I mean, honestly, like it's a super high percentage of toilets that are clogged that are their fault. It might be like almost 100%, but like it's probably not quite 100%. It's very high. When a toilet's clogged, it's normally what, Jarrod? Too much toilet paper.
True.
Or other toys or other items that shouldn't be down there that are down there. And I mean, that's a very typical complaint. The toilet's clogged. Sometimes it's a leaky sink. These things are very normal. They happen quite often. Sometimes a leaky sink isn't because anything was wrong. It's because when they put their stuff underneath their sink, they bumped it. They hit it. Their dog hit it. Whatever. Like, I mean, there's so many reasons why something could happen, right?
Sure.
So I think in today's podcast, we've talked about like there's kind of like lumping these into like three. You have three different sections of.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we have legitimate concerns.
Yeah.
And so our complaints. Those are things that, as a property manager, you'd want to, and we can go a little bit detailed in a second, but those are things we would figure are necessary. You have understandable things. So that would be like where it's like, okay, technically we don't have an issue, but I can see where the tenant has a problem with that. And you're kind of like in maybe a gray area. Where should I not, and you have to make a decision, and then you have some that are just outrageous,
outlandish, just ridiculous,
just madness. So how you handle those different situations, and there's actually from that initial request or complaint, there's now this whole new communication line that's happening that can create from one thing. So
I think it's important though, like to know all three of them need to be addressed.
Agreed.
And a lot of like if you have a good property manager, they're going to address them. But some of them, a good portion of them, need to be addressed by you as a property owner.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Occasionally we have, a property where like there's a roof leak, a very serious, to me, like something like a roof leak is one of those in the first section.
Sure.
It's not the tenant's fault
Agreed.
that there's a roof leak. Never. It doesn't matter. And it may not be your fault. Like it might not be my fault as a property owner. Like I might have a property and the roof leaks, and it's possible I just put a new roof on. That happens in Northwest Indiana. We have winds, we have trees, we have things that can happen. We actually just had a storm a couple of months ago. I'm not sure. Like I don't even remember it being that bad of a storm, but there was like 3 or 4 of our properties where siding fell off. Yeah. Like siding got and again, it was probably one of these like really quick, fast. Like maybe I was in a building and I didn't realize that we had a super fast storm, and I think there was actually even some hail that came through at the time. But we even had a commercial building that we manage that the fascia fell off, and it's just like wow, like things happen. So like that's a legitimate concern, right?
Totally.
So what's the first thing? Like the property manager needs to address it, right? And then part of this is like the owner needs to know. They need to take responsibility. Hey, it's my property. It's not the property manager's fault.
Sure.
It's not the tenant's fault. It's the storm's fault. It's Mother Nature. It's whatever. Like, and it just needs to be addressed. And I think if we go into it with a mindset of, hey, all issues need to be addressed, and they're not a big deal. It's just an issue. It's just an issue. It's just kind of like a level 10 meeting. If you are familiar with EOS, issues aren't big deals. They're just an issue. We need to solve it. We need to get it done and move on. So I think that's just a way to, I don't know, just think about it, have the mindset around the whole deal. But like let's think about a roof leak. So, property manager gets called, and or maybe I think we try to make them put the request in the buildium, and so it's documented.
Documentation.
And at that point, then the property manager needs to send somebody out to go look at it, right?
Yep.
And then obviously, if it's leaking, we got to get, this is one of these things that's kind of like an emergency repair. I would put it in the emergency whenever there's water in Northwest Indiana, and probably anywhere really.
Sure.
In the house, that's an emergency. Sure. So these are items that we're gonna probably, and the property manager, I believe, should go out and tarp it. They should do it right away. And these are one of those things that I think should just be done automatically. There shouldn't be an approval process. I know in our stuff we say over $500 should be approved, but if it's an emergency, you have to stop the water. Right. Now, as far as fixing the leak down the road or replacing a section of roof, that all kind of goes to the investor to be able to approve and make happen. So a legitimate request comes in. Yeah. What next? Anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I just think you do want your property manager to be actively taking care of these issues. You would like them done in a timely manner, because it's part of customer service, and you want your tenants to be happy. And it's really interesting. You have some come over, and we had an issue at a property where there was an issue with a drain, and the tenant, we put the tenant in, and what we ended up finding was there was a collapsed tile. It happens. So we got the tenant in there. We found out the issue, and we told the tenant, okay, here's the issue. We're gonna have to relocate you for a night, so we can fix the issue. We dug it out, had the plumber come in, they fixed it, and at that point you think the tenant's gonna be unhappy. They're gonna be upset because we just moved in, as a problem. This tenant was ecstatic, because not only did we take care of the issue, but we got done quickly. And they were accustomed to issues just being there constantly.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. We talked about the issue has to be solved. It should be solved as quick as possible.
Absolutely.
But now let me put a but in there. There are also emergency issues.
Absolutely.
And non-emergency issues.
Prioritization.
If your, let's just say, for instance, your storm door isn't quite, or it's creaking, and it's not quite shutting properly.
I hate it when it creaks.
We've had this issue, this exact issue. That's why I said it. So that I wouldn't consider that an emergency. Now, should it get addressed?
Sure.
Absolutely. Should you send somebody out there? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean if it's a after-hours phone call, it's necessarily going to get addressed that night.
Agreed.
And maybe not even get addressed the next day.
No.
But it's going to get addressed. Sure. Hopefully, I would say in the next week with something like that. But if it's water in the house, oh crap, we got to get somebody out there right now.
Absolutely.
But honestly, I'll even give you an example. We talked about clogged toilets. That's maybe not, unless it's overflowing, that's not an emergency either. That's something that could be done tomorrow. That's something that, and especially if they have two toilets in a property, that might be done tomorrow. Yep. And it's not, we get a phone call at 5:00 tonight, it's probably not going to happen tonight. It probably will happen first thing in the morning. So I think although we have 3 different types of, repairs that could be called upon, or you're calling them complaints. I'm not even really going to call them complaints. I'm more just maintenance requests is maybe the better term for it. But you have a maintenance request. You have these 3 different, legitimate kind of gray area. I don't know, whatever. And then there is the, completely illegitimate, just complaining at that point.
Yeah.
And then I think even outside of that, you have to separate it into the emergency, non-emergency.
Yeah, you definitely see that there's a transition, or it evolves from throughout this list, where it goes from necessary to a legitimate issue to absolutely ridiculous, and that's where it would be a complaint. And at that point, you're absolutely right. And so you have these legitimate issues. And one thing, again, Tom did mention it a second ago about the idea that, hey, things happen. And so in your scenario where a wind blows and a siding piece comes off, that is one of the reasons why you have maintenance in your performance. That's to be expected, and shouldn't be shocking. Do you like it? Of course not. No one likes paying money, but that was part of your performa. You did have that in mind when things were coming up, so it shouldn't be shocking that they do.
It should have been thought about beforehand, and it shouldn't be a surprise when it happens.
Yeah, and just so you know, it does. It does. So happen. You can, if you think of that way, if you're an investor and you don't like getting them, maybe you ought to look into lending or something like that, where there aren't those issues coming up, because you're going to get them. Now you're going to get the positives later or throughout the whole time.
Right. And honestly, like we're going through this with some people right now where they're seeing how big of a real return on investment they've had over 5 and 6 and 7 years. Like your real estate portfolio gets really exciting after that 5, 6, 7, 8 year mark. A couple things are happening at that point. Number one, your amortization is starting to finally kick in. You're starting to pay more on the principal. And if you were smart and you paid a little bit more even on the principal throughout those first 7 years, like you're going to start snowballing these things down pretty quick. So you're not only are you gaining equity at a much faster rate, your rents have gone up. So your cash flow has gone up.
Has your mortgage payment
gone
up?
And like what most people say, what most people I've heard, one of my good friends, Glenn Stromberg, says this all the time to his investors. And he's like, the increase in rents over a long period of time, 10, 20 years, are going to cover most of your maintenance. Like if you just think of it that way, like, maybe not in year 1, but like year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 through the next 20 years, if you own a rental property long term, and that's really the goal, I think. Is gonna like that's gonna pay for it. It really is $100 a month. An increase is gonna be $1,200 a year. Well, if you have $1,200 a year and those repairs are those maintenance repairs, and then think about it in the next year. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's $150. That's $1,800. Maybe the next year it's $200 more in rent, and now we're talking $2,400. Like in the long term, that's because you are going to have things, right? Roofs do go bad; they don't stay forever. Basements do leak. Electric goes bad. Plumbing goes bad. Things just windows get old. Things do happen. There are. It's just like, and again, it's just like our own house. We have to constantly maintain our own properties. I was at a property yesterday that looked like the outside of the house hadn't been swept for maybe like 3 or 4 years. Like a single tenant probably has never swept the outside. It was a tenant property, and I'm like, man, it was like by the time you swept just this driveway, there was like this much dirt on the sidewalk. I was like, my goodness, this is like, you know what I mean? So it's like it's just. A tenant's never going to take care of the property as well, I don't believe. Now, there might be some. That's the exception. Sure. But so legitimate complaints or legitimate, we talked about that. Make sure those happen. Now, what happens when there's like a gray area? How do you address that?
Yeah. So in that case, now you're, as an investor, this stuff happens all the time. So we'll have a situation where typically we are not putting on storm doors.
Right.
On our properties. Why? Because exactly what you said. They break down. It's like ceiling fans. Ceiling fans and storm doors. They break down so quickly, and so we generally don't put them in. Now, a tenant may ask us, "Hey, can we put in a storm door? Because I want to have my door open. I want to have a breeze coming in and take advantage of that, or I want to have a ceiling fan for some reason, so I don't have to use my AC unit." In some cases, investors have said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. Go ahead and put it in." In some cases, we say, no, we're not going to do that. If you want to put that, you can, but it's going to be at your own cost. And it has to be done by someone who's capable, like someone from our team, or depending on the repair, it may need to be a licensed person and so on, depending on what's going on.
And a third option, which is I really like this option, is every year when somebody ends their lease and they start a new lease, for us, instead of us saying, okay, it's time to sign a new lease, we try to tell them, hey, it's your 1-year anniversary, and you're going to get an anniversary gift. And guess what? The anniversary gift just always happens to be something that's going to raise value to the property or give the tenant a little better, something they want. So we might give them an option of a ceiling fan or maybe a storm door or maybe a closet organizer or something that might help their experience be better, but also they feel like they got something, but it's really going to be, helping the property. So in those gray areas and those things where it's kind of like, do we say this is legitimate? Do they really want it? And obviously like I've even seen with well-off people, with well-to-do people, everybody has a different opinion about what is nice in their own house and what they think they have to have versus what things that they don't have to have. So these are things that kind of in this gray area where it's kind of more of opinion, right? I mean, I think that's what we're talking about. It's like, and even our property manager's opinion is going to differ from a different property manager, and I think a lot of it, I would say probably more than 50% of the things that come in are in this realm. Like they're probably in this. I think there's probably only like 10% that are really illegitimate and like just crazy, stupid people. I think there's probably 40% legitimate things that happen that we need to fix, and then 50% of the items are probably in this like, oh, I don't know, should we do it? Should we not do it? And those are that's why we want to be able to communicate with the owners and know, like, how would you want to handle this? Because some people would say, hey, yeah, give it to them. Give them that storm door, give them a ceiling fan, give them whatever. And and those are probably good examples, but there's probably 100 more that could be talked about.
Well, like when we've even heard is maybe a toilet takes a long time for the tank to fill. Like it takes like a few minutes for the tank to fill, and we're thinking like, I mean, how rapidly are you using that restroom?
Tanks. Those are normally the old tanks.
Apparently.
And actually, like what I've been told is those are the better tanks. They use more water, but like they get the water down, and the toilets don't clog as often. But whatever. Sure. Like now we're into this like half a gallon water, thing. But yeah, again, that's something that I would probably as an owner be like, no, I'm sorry, exactly. I'm not going to give you that.
Yeah, exactly. No, we've been there, and we have properties that we hold until we sell. And so we get these same questions that our owners get. Now, in the end, many times as an investor, you also do want to take your tenant in mind. And if they're a good tenant, they pay, and maybe they've been there for longer than a year, and they ask for a screen door, it may eat into your money a little bit, but if they take care of your property, you really haven't had maintenance repairs, that might be a nice little thing you can do for your tenant. So that's the gray area where you may choose, is this request or this complaint legitimate? No, it's not a problem. It's not an issue with the function of the home.
Or it might be an issue for them, but it really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the gray goes from dark gray to light gray. And and
I'm colorblind, so I get that totally. So anyway, those are some areas that are understandable, kind of gray area type things, which do come up, and so you kind of got to make the decision, working with your property manager. What do you think? That's the kind of situation you say, well, what do you think we should do? Type thing.
Have a conversation, talk it out. Whatever you decide, do it, and just move on. Yeah. Like just go from there. Now you've also got the illegitimate. You've got the ridiculous. You've got the and. What I would say is even these kind of might even have two different sections.
Sure.
I feel like you've got one that, and from my experience, is probably more likely even. It's when a legitimate complaint turns illegitimate. It's like,
sure.
I have an issue. I've got a squirrel in my attic. Okay? We've got lots of squirrels in our area. So, and when you have 2-story houses at Cape Cod, they have those little vents. And a lot of times those squirrels will eat the vents. They literally will chew through the vents and they will get in your attic. So it doesn't happen very often, but I would say about every year we get about one squirrel in a house somewhere. And, we had a situation at one point where a legitimate complaint, a legitimate issue turned very illegitimate, very fast, and it was like, why? Like, it doesn't have to be this way.
Sure.
But we sent out a professional company that, and in our area, I think it was Monroe, and we sent out 3 or 4 different professional companies throughout this a long, extended 6-month period of time. But, a legitimate complaint, yes, okay, things happen. Animals get in attics. We don't want them in attics, and we need to get them out, right? Yep. So we called a company, and then when the company showed up, Jarrod, you remember what happened?
I don't.
The tenant refused to let the company fix the issue.
Oh boy!
So, honestly, I've actually seen this happen more than just like a tenant that's just complaining and just ridiculous and just whatever. Like, yes, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does happen. They can be ridiculous, and normally you find out the nut cases really quickly.
Very quickly.
But my good friend Walter says you never know when crazy's going to show up. Like that. That's one of his statements. So you never know when crazy's going to.
If you're in property manager, it's going to show up every day.
It's going to show up quite often. Yeah. But there is a lot of them that it's a legitimate complaint. It's just the tenant won't even let you fix it, or the way that you fixed it they don't think is the right way or something. And so that's something else to kind of keep think about and just be understanding with it that. And that tenant eventually we ended up having to evict because he kept complaining, right. And then didn't want to pay his rent. But I'm like, well, then we see he didn't like that company, and honestly, in hindsight, I probably would have sent the same company out again the second time, and just said, and maybe sent a representative from our company to them and just been done with it. Sure. And if you don't like it, then we're done. We're not even going to fix it, and we're going to evict you because now you are not compliant because really they have now broken the lease because now they're not letting us fix the property. But I think we sent 3 different companies out there, and he wouldn't let anybody in the property. I don't think we even got the squirrel out until we evicted him. And I think he tried to come to court with his chest pumped out, thinking that he was gonna. The judge obviously ruled in our favor because we could show, hey, we sent this person out, we sent this other person out, we sent this other, and these are legitimate companies. and this is what they do for a living.
Yeah.
So you have a complaint, we're trying to fix it, and let us fix it.
Yeah, in that situation, they can't kill the animal. They have to trap it, and they leave it open so that if there's a family, they catch them all. It's just really interesting, and that if I remember correctly, the tenant did not want to work alongside with that situation. But that's interesting. So you said that it goes from legitimate issue to a complaint.
Or illegitimate, like they're just
yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I feel like there's a lot of them that happen that way.
Does.
Like there's a legitimate problem, and we will try to address it, and then crazy shows up.
So speaking of crazy, so there's a couple different situations where those can arise. These ridiculous situations. One of them is there's a situation where everything seems to be going normal, and then all of a sudden a tenant doesn't pay. So you put a 10-day letter on, right? And then you file an eviction. Okay, so then this is normal process. Stuff happens. Now all of a sudden there's a complaint, and in many cases now the complaints are coming out of the woodwork.
Oh, absolutely! Like
Classic.
every single person.
Classic.
To me, it's almost like one of those things where it should be obvious. It should be like if you're a new property owner and you own, you should expect that to happen
Yes.
at that point. And if it doesn't happen, great. But like it's gonna happen probably more, or at least 40% of the time, it's probably gonna happen where now all of a sudden like everything has been bad since day one, even though there's never been a complaint reported,
Correct.
even though there's never been anything. You're absolutely right. I didn't even think about that when we talked about this podcast, but absolutely, and I think it's just human nature for us to not take personal responsibility.
Sure.
And for us not to, say that we could have had any part in this as far as a tenant is concerned, or a resident, whatever you want to call them. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. That happens quite often where, it's always at the end where like all of a sudden now there's like a longer list of things that you never took care of. And they're just trying to make everybody that they possibly can, not look good in the situation. But this is where, going back to one of our original points, is having the documentation, knowing and having a process. And if you have that process and you show them, hey, this was our process.
Absolutely.
If there's a complaint, this is how you're supposed to, even how you're supposed to report the complaint is supposed to go through Buildium. And if you don't follow the process, that's your responsibility. It's nobody else's. This is the lease you signed. The lease said that you were going to use, Buildium to upload your complaints, and they're even supposed to upload pictures to be able to see if there is an issue when it comes to all those things. So I think that's a really good point. And like we said, like sometimes crazy just shows. It could be other reasons. Really, sometimes people just don't have the money and they're just too proud to admit it. Sometimes people just they have personal issues. And that's kind of where I started the whole thing. Like 60+% of people own properties and 40% don't. It is the group that we're serving. You have to understand, we're offering a service in a house to this group. So that's who we're serving. But understand that there will be some situations and some, not even just expectations. Because I think even us, I think a lot of good property managers try to do a good job of the upfront expectation, and they do the best, but the crazy still shows up. Sure. Somewhere down the road.
Well, again, at that point, that creates a new situation. How your property manager is now going to deal with that new complaint,
right?
Because really what that does is it really fires you up. Naturally, you're upset, saying, "Hey, we actually took great care of you. Now you're lying. You're misrepresenting everything that's happened up to this point." And you have to be careful and be professional and be above board in how you respond. Because again, now there's documentation going the other way, because now they're trying to bait you in many cases. And so
you're absolutely right. So in those situations, the correct response is to still understand, hey, even if it's outlandish and even if it's ridiculous, you still got to address it. You still got to figure out, okay, well, if this is an issue, then let's get it uploaded. Let's get somebody out there to take a look at it, and let's see what we can possibly do. At that point, they may not be so eager to let somebody in the property, which happens. But if it does, at least you knew that you did the right thing. A statement that goes through and through my mind. And I teach my kids this. I hear my parents saying this, but 2 wrongs never make a right. So trying to make sure,
song too, isn't it?
Probably. I mean, there's probably lots of country music songs that are pertain to that, but so 2 wrongs never make a right. So even if the tenant gets that way, we got to be careful to not like, oh, well, if they're going to do that, I'm going to do this. Like we can't do that.
And you have to expect it, and then you have your classic responses, and then at that point you know that you want that tenant gone. There's no coming back from that type of thing. Now you have the straight up ridiculous from the beginning. Okay. So recently we had a situation in a property in this past winter where a tenant called in saying the furnace wasn't working.
Oh my word!
And
this is great.
Yeah,
story.
this is powerful story. So the furnace wasn't working. We go there and it's like, hey, the furnace is operating fine. They called back and said, no, it's not. It's not working well. It's not the right size, or it's not getting air properly. We're looking at duct work. We're doing all these different things. Come to find out, the tenant's issue was that the furnace was not getting hotter than over 80 degrees in the house.
In the wintertime, why you would want your house to be 80 degrees?
Over 80 degrees.
I have no idea.
That, my friends.
I'm getting hot, Jarrod. Just thinking.
Yeah.
Like that being that hot.
It reminds
in my
me
house.
of Florida
I don't want to be that hot in my house. I don't
Yeah.
understand it. But yeah, so like I think their issue was it wouldn't get above 76 or something like that.
It was crazy.
It won't get above 76. And so we even sent a professional licensed HVAC guy out to go look at the thing. And come to find out, the guy said, hey, like, and this was when it was 0 degrees.
Yeah, right.
So it's 0 degrees outside. He's like, it's only meant to make your property, like, I think it's like 40 or 50 degrees hotter than it is outside. Like, really, like at the end of the day, and I'm not sure, that's probably not right, so don't quote me on that. But it's only meant to go so much warmer than it is outside to begin with. And when it's 0, I mean, a lot of times, like, I think even in my house, we had our furnace at like 67 or something like that during that period of time. It actually feels kind of warm inside. It still feels warm inside at 67.
Oh, yeah.
And now it feels pretty cool in the summertime when it's set at 67. But, you know, absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's funny because this was a good case too.
Yep,
because
it was a great case.
It was great because they even contacted the city.
Yep.
You know, so tenants sometimes they think they've got some power and they have knowledge on you. They'll contact the city. They contacted the city, and the city actually sent somebody out to look at it. And they had to tell the person, like, hey, ma'am, you know, in the state of Indiana, like, the landlord only has to make sure the house gets up to 68. It wasn't even close. Like, it wasn't even in wintertime. And maybe it wasn't even 68. It might even have been colder than that, 65. I'm not sure exactly what the temperature was. But it wasn't even close to how warm it was. I think it was 64, 65 in the house when the city came out to inspect this property that wasn't warm enough.
Right.
And the guy actually told me, I'm like, I got to take my coat off. It's too hot in here. So it was kind of funny on our end. You know, and when he showed up, there was a guy there not wearing a shirt and wearing shorts.
Yeah.
And, I mean, in the middle of winter when it's 0 degrees outside, it was probably kind of funny. And obviously sometimes, you know, different people laugh about different things, but at the end of the day, again, ridiculous.
In that situation, the city actually told them, don't call us about this issue again.
Exactly.
They said that. And so it's one example. That's extreme, but there are a lot of extreme situations. I shouldn't say a lot, but like you said, maybe 10% or 5% of the complaints can be along that line where they're ridiculous. And so again, now we have a way we have to respond to it. A good property manager is going to respond correctly. We already know that this tenant, they're calling the city over something that's just ridiculous. They will never rent from us again. Once the lease is over, they're gone. And so these are different types of things you want to make sure that you're taking care of. And in some situations, you may not want that tenant in there at all, period, where you're saying like, okay, if you're not happy anymore, you tell you what, we'll let you cancel the lease today, because you really don't want that person in your property if they're calling the city and it's like 70 degrees in the house.
Yeah, that's whole red flags. We have a whole
yeah.
podcast where we could do over red flags and things that you can think about. I think we've talked about this quite a bit, in the past, about trying to at least weed out or funnel through crazy as much as you can up front. But and this is a great reason again why I don't want to manage myself, because I want somebody else to deal with it. And I think this is a good time to bring this up. We haven't talked about this, but like, even a good property manager at times, right, are going to get sucked in.
Oh yeah.
To this emotionally.
Absolutely.
They're going to get upset, right? Because like, think about it. Like, if that was your tenant, I just want to ask everybody, if this was your tenant and they called the city on you, like, most people would probably be pissed. Oh, yeah. I was kind of laughing. I wasn't really upset about it.
No, I was upset.
I was
angry.
I was like, oh, come on. Are you kidding me? Like, this is stupid. Like, I knew what the city was going to say. Like, I could already see this whole thing transpiring in my mind. This is what's going to happen. This is the next step. And like, so for me, I wasn't upset. But like, your property manager, like even a good one, might get a little upset about this. And it's at times, they may even say things they shouldn't say, which I'm not condoning that. I'm not advocating. I'm not condoning it. They shouldn't, and we shouldn't. But I'll be honest with you. There's probably times where even we might say some things that we shouldn't say, or do something. And we, again, like, I try to control this. Jarrod kind of tries to control this. Cheryl tries to control this. But it's just human. We have to kind of be understanding. If we have to be understanding with tenants, We also have to be a little bit understanding with our property managers at times. Sure. And I can't even give you an example where this has happened with a tenant. I don't think that I can give you an example of how we may have been a little bit curt with a contractor. Sure. But I honestly can't. I'm not saying that it hasn't happened. It probably has that I haven't heard about. Sure. But I just want to throw that out there. That, hey, like, we all get a little bit feelings hurt. We all kind of get our feathers in a ruffle every once in a while. But a good property manager is going to, at some point, suck it up and say, hey, what? You know what? We're going to get back to doing the right thing. And like you said, still addressing the issue. So being professional about it and trying to do the best you possibly can.
Yeah, those situations are usually worse when it's one right after another. You know, you have that tough call and ridiculousness, and then another one right after. That's where you're about to explode, right? That's where it's a tough situation. But again, that's why you pay your property manager to manage for you, so you don't have to deal with that. They do this for a living, and so keep that in mind. Keep that in mind, that they're the ones handling these kind of phone calls. And so, you know, sometimes we might want to say, hey, take it easy on your property manager. They're doing one of the worst jobs. It's just not a fun job. But they are taking care of you, trying to make sure that your property is cash flowing, that your tenants are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so we really do hope this podcast today brought you value as far as handling tenant complaints. And so thank you for joining us today.
Well, I do have one quick thing I want to just throw in. I'll probably throw this in the next couple podcasts, so I probably won't do this too long. But we do have an event coming up in October. It is more than likely going to sell out. And when I say sell out, it's a free event. So there's no tickets that everybody has to purchase. But we are requiring you to get a ticket because we can only take 100 people. And we already have 80 people that are signed up for this thing. We kind of just started on Facebook and we just said, hey, like, let's do an event. So, and it's not even really for turnkeys. It's really for real estate investors. So if you're a real estate investor out there listening to this and you're like, hey, I'd like to kind of go to a event to hang out with a bunch of other real estate investors for a couple cool, 3 or 4 days. It's really only 2.5 days. October 8th through 10th, it's going to be right here in our office. So it would give you an opportunity to be able to come see our team, but also have a good fun time here. And if you're interested in that, you can, I'm not even sure if there's a place you can go right now, but I think you can go to Good Success. It's actually called Real Estate Free for All because we're not even really trying to make it super structured.
So when you say free for all, it means everybody, it's free.
It's free. Basically, well, we have some sponsors that have actually paid, to be here and to have a booth and maybe speak a little bit. But the whole thing's not all about the presentations. We're actually going to have group participation and try to maybe even do some round tables. And we're going to have a couple really fun nights where we go to a restaurant as a group once, and maybe we might even have a bonfire, do something here locally at our office. So either way, like it's going to be fun. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. We're not making a massive push for it. I don't have a marketing campaign. I don't have anything. Just wanted to kind of throw that out to if anybody's interested in that. If you want to just email me at TOlson, that's TOLSON at goodsuccess.com. I can connect you with our sales guy, John Morey, who's helping me with that, and Aaron, and we can get you set up with all that. So and we can get you on the list. So just want to throw that out there. October 8th through the 10th, the Real Estate Free for All.
Real Estate Free for All. So thank you for joining us. Don't forget, we do build rental portfolios for investors. So if you look at that right behind Tom said, it says building rental portfolios for investors. That's what we do.
Oh, that's what we do.
Yeah, that's what we do. So if you're interested in that, you can go to our website at buyolsongroup.com. You can join our buyers list there. You can actually access more of our podcasts there. You can see our team. We have team photos of all of our team members.
Nice.
Sharp. It's great. And also you can just email me at Jarrod@buyolsongroup.com. That's OLSON, like Tom said. And so really hope we brought value today. Active Turnkey,
the best way to buy rentals.
See you guys.
Olson Group Network makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, Olson Group Network does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of Olson Group Network. Olson Group Network assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast or the compliance with the applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.